He is a health and safety and environment engineer for Square D. He also is a Boone County firefighter EMT, and it's also his 35th wedding anniversary today, and he also had to use his EMT skills this morning, so I'll let him tell you about that.
Thank you. I think after 35 years of marriage, my wife is the one that needs EMT skills. I'm a lot to put up with over that period of time. I can tell you, she's due for canonization at some point, I'm relatively sure. I'm excited to be here today. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Have a chance to come to you and talk to you a little bit about some of the things that are happening in Boone County, because quite frankly, a lot of the things that are happening here are groundbreaking. They're way ahead of the curve. And we hear so much of the time where we may be lacking in one area or lacking in another. But in terms of what Boone County's done, we've really taken an additional step. And I think it's very important to understand just where we're strong as well as where we need improvement. So that's why I wanted to visit with you here today. If we can go to the first slide. I'm going to start by telling you a little story. I think that the word Bhopal probably rings a bell with everybody in this room. Late 1983, early 1984, there was a release of methyl isocyanate, okay, and depending on whose figures you read, there were probably somewhere upwards of 3,800 direct fatalities, and there were thousands of residual losses in terms of disabilities and things that bad things that happen to people that quite frankly are continuing to this day. Well, when this happened, one of the first things that we began to look at in the United States was, could this happen here? And the answer at that time was, yeah, it could, and probably pretty easily, okay? Because what goes on behind factory doors was proprietary, the doors were closed, we didn't always know what was in there, even the emergency responders didn't always know what was in there. In terms of legislation, it was a fortunate time because there was a requirement to reauthorize the Superfund Act that was coming up at about this period of time. And so what the lawmakers did is they said, you know what, as long as we're going to reauthorize Superfund, as long as we're going to put that big pool of money out there to clean up our environmental messes, let's add some teeth to it. Let's put in something requiring communities to plan a little bit, and let's put something in there that says something about the community's right to know. And that's one of the reasons I'm really excited about being here today, because this is information that you should have. You should know that this stuff is out there. You should know where you could go to get more information. In terms of the requirements of what became known as EPCRA, or the Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act, the whole thing revolves around a concept called the LEPC, or the Local Emergency Planning Committee. Okay? I want to be up front with this. This is not part of the fire department. It's not part of the police department, either in Boone County or in Columbia. This is chartered through the county commission. Okay? It's made up of government officials, a lot of first responders, business folks, and that's what I'm doing here today. I represent business, educators, and concerned citizens. We want the concerned citizens on our committee as well. It's overseen by the state of Missouri and the Missouri Emergency Response Commission. They give us our marching orders, and they provide oversight to make sure we're doing the things that we're required by law to do. And what we have to do, quite frankly, is plan for emergencies involving hazardous materials. What we're going to do is we're going to, number one, we collect data on who has hazardous materials. You've got somewhere between 47 and 55 what we call fixed facilities or factories that have hazardous materials here in a sufficient amount where they need to be reported. We oversee that reporting process, okay? There's something called a Tier 2 report, and there's another report called a Form R that has to be submitted. So we collect that data so we know who has the materials. We want to know specifically what kind of materials they have. We want to know how much they have. We want to know how it's stored. This is all information that we need to possess. Another thing is if there are any releases, our responsibility is to track the releases of these. And then we plan responses if something is going to happen. If there's a spill of methyl ethyl whatever up the street at the ABC factory, or if we have a chlorine truck that overturns on I-70, I mean, a lot of you may or may not be aware, but really the biggest exposure that we have in Boone County is that highway, okay? Everything goes down I-70. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, I believe personally, as to where we're going to have an event like this. So we have to be upfront with this, and we have to be ready to go. So that's what you have up to this point. You have community's right to know, okay? And I'm going to tell you right now, if you want our emergency response plan, we just got finished rebuilding the whole thing from dead scratch. Go to gocolumbiamo.com, go into emergency response, and you can see our emergency response plan. It's there available for every citizen to look at. The other thing is that the Tier 2 information that's in the public record, if you want that, that's available to you too. All you have to do is contact the LEPC, and they'll get you anything that's available, anything that the law says that you're entitled to. Okay, we're very open about that. And that's all the good news. That's been going on since 1986. And then we have 9/11 and everything changes, okay? What we found out when 9/11 happened is there were a lot of things that did not go well in terms of emergency response. It also opened our eyes to the fact that a hazardous materials event all by itself may or may not happen. You may have a hazardous material event that's mixed up with a fire. You may have a fire that's mixed up with a medical event, and somewhere along the line hazardous materials got involved. So you don't have this clean thing where you're just going out there and picking up spills. There's always the opportunity to overlap. And one of the things that 9/11 showed us very clearly is when we bring a lot of agencies and even a lot of different fire agencies, police, you know, all the different folks that are involved, there are some real problems, all right? And so what the federal government did is they put together an overall plan. They put together the proverbial big piece of paper, and they said, you know what, we need to coordinate our resources and we need to do better at saving lives and property. Right after that, what do we have? We have the Atlantic hurricane season in 2005, Katrina and all her brothers and sisters. We had some large disasters that hit. We had, quite frankly, a lot of agencies responded down there, and they did very well. Boone County actually sent Missouri Task Force 1 down there, okay, to represent us. A very, very good group of folks. And what we found was when we were down there is that there was weak, often non-existent local planning, and that drastically slowed the response. In the end down there, we had 100,000 emergency responders staged outside of New Orleans in the first 24 hours. But almost none of them got into the field, okay? None of them got into the field, no significant number. And basically what we found was that it was dangerous for the responders and it was dangerous for the people down there. So we started looking at what had happened, and what we found out was everybody that went down there had a slightly different set of objectives. They had terrible communication issues, they had waste. I don't know if you can see this graphic very well on my chart, but basically the way that communications works among emergency responders is if you have the fire department there, all the fire department folks talk to each other. The police, all the police talk to each other, okay? The medical people, they all talk to each other. But if you're going to have an interchange, if police wants to talk to fire, what do? Up until recently, they call up to joint communications and say, tell the police guys this. The joint communication would relay the message back. You start doing that with a lot of traffic, and I think you can see that things get jammed up in a big hurry. That simply wasn't going to work well for Boone County. So the LEPC here decided it was going to grow. Okay? We have a chairman and a vice chairman who are extremely capable and active people who have years of experience in emergency response, and they pretty clearly saw what the problem was. That's Scott Olson, who's an assistant chief at Boone County, and Terry Castle, Columbia Fire, who's also an assistant chief. And they said, you know what, we need to take this thing by the horns. We need to improve what we do here. We cannot let the lessons that we learned when we went down there with Missouri Task Force 1 go to waste. And so what we did is we rewrote all the response plans, and we'd come up with something called Unified Command. Now this is really different, and if you've been around any emergency responders, you'll know how different, because basically what we're saying now is we don't want this thing where everybody's got their own little command posts and they're all trying to talk back and forth between joint communication. We want all the incident commanders in the same room where they can look each other in the eye, they can sit around a table like this group is right here, they can look at each other, they can talk about what needs to be done, and when the decision is made, everybody's on the same page, okay? And you'd think, well, gee, why didn't we do this 30 or 40 years ago? And the answer is, I don't know, but we're working really hard on making sure it gets done now. This has been a chronic problem everywhere in the country, and it's being addressed here. So you've got this unified command thing going on. And they said, you know what we need to do, though, is we've got all these emergency responders in here. We better get the private sector involved, because quite frankly, if you have a spill at my company, I know what's being spilled, I know how much is being spilled, I know where it is in the building, I know what needs to be done with it. They don't, okay? They need me there at that table. I help coordinate the objectives. So they went out and they made a conscious move to get the private sector involved through a series of tabletop exercises. And I can show you in this picture, this is one of our first exercises, and what you're seeing here is you're seeing the fire chief, you are seeing the law enforcement representative, and you're seeing the person who's representing this particular company all standing together. Okay, this is a unified command post. And they'll go back and they'll talk to their own folks on the radio, but they're all standing eye to eye making the decisions. We found out that we had very clear communication doing this. It's very easy to coordinate goals and objectives, because believe me, what the private sector has for goals and objectives is different than what the emergency responders have. The emergency responders are life safety, okay? They're going to stabilize the incident, and then third and final, they're going to conserve property. What does the private sector want to do in a plant? Get back online and make widgets, because those are jobs, that's tax money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you better have all those folks there so that you can make good decisions and try to achieve all those objectives simultaneously, and then way you can have a coordinated response. I want to talk a little bit about the kind of resources that we coordinate here in Boone County, because they are significant. Okay, the first thing that I'm going to tell you about is Boone County Fire is one of the leading volunteer fire departments in the entire United States. You've got 400 firefighters in 14 stations, and they're covering 500 square miles. It's an award-winning operation. It really is. And out of that has sprung Missouri Task Force 1, and Boone County is probably the only suburban, and by that I mean we're not a large city here like St. Louis or Kansas City, but we actually support a task force, an urban search and rescue task force, and we're one of the few small communities that do that, and it's something we can be very proud of. So between Columbia and Boone County Fire and Missouri Task Force 1, we've got lots of resources, okay? In particular, you can look at Boone County and you can see we've got creative ways to use water, because we don't have hydrants out there, so we have the tankers. Columbia doesn't have any tankers, but they've got those big tall ladders that we call sticks. Okay, and when we get into something that's very tall, we need them too. So working together is a good thing. We also have several law enforcement agencies. We've got Columbia Police, Boone County Sheriff, Missouri Highway Patrol. We've got all these folks out there, and they need to be coordinated as well to make the scene safe. We also have a very unique emergency medical response team here. I don't know how many of you know it, but every ambulance that rolls in this county is what we call advanced life support. And you don't get that often in St. Louis, Kansas City, and I know you don't get it where I came from in Denver. They're usually basic life support. Here, the standard medical call, you get a fire engine with a bunch of emergency medical technicians, then you get the ambulance, then you get the transport. It's a wonderful chain of life here, and it works really well. And because we now have this unified command, we're doing so much better at having all these folks work together as a team, and it's really something to see, especially if you're on the inside. How do we do this? Well, we actually went through and we had 2 seminars in 2006 where we actually brought the private and the public sector together, okay? And what we decided to do was go ahead and rotate those seminars and continue to have them through the county. So one time we'll have Columbia involved, the next time we'll have Boone County involved, then we'll have Southern Boone involved, all these different agencies. And what we found is if we've gone through these tabletops where we'll take a company and we'll lay out a scenario and we'll work through the scenario, and we have 15 or 20 people in each group that can give their input, is we start discovering problems that we thought we had solved a long time ago, and we find out they're not necessarily taken care of. When we come out of this tabletop, okay, the work product is we have new information that we can use so that we can go back and we can improve our standard operating procedures. Not only that, the public sector has a chance to meet people in the private sector, okay? If Boone County or let's say Columbia Fire comes rolling into my plant someday, they'll look around and it won't be who's in charge here, it'll be, hey Ted, we need some information, okay? The other thing is because we in the private sector now understand something about how the public sector responds, when we have our internal spill teams and our internal medical teams and our internal fire teams, we can now assume a lot of the same conventions. We're using green for our command vests. We're using the same radio protocols. We start looking at how to identify locations in the building. I know at my plant, if we call 911, we can tell the folks the event is in quadrant A and you're going to enter at corner 1-2. And you know what? They know what they know what we're talking about, so they're not spending all their time driving around the building trying to figure out where to go. So that kind of thing has been extremely helpful. It's kind of this cross-pollination. And the other thing is every time we get into one of these tabletop exercises, we drive in a little bit deeper and we learn a little bit more. So what have we accomplished? Well, we've got a process that now we can use to define clear objectives for all stakeholders. That's very important. We've done something to maximize communications, and I think we'll all remember that right after 911, the first thing that all the press ran around with is, we need more radios out there. You know, not everybody's got enough radios. Let's fund more radios for our emergency responders. The problem's not radios, folks. We've got enough radios out there right now where we can walk over each other all day long and nobody can understand anything. What we needed was a better process for using the tools that we had. And in Boone County, we figured out now a way, through this unified command process, we've got the same number of radios, we've got the same number of frequencies, and for now, it's working well. We've improved the response, okay? Anytime that you can get the private sector to streamline what they do and not offload their responsibility for emergency response, then what that does is that kind of plows the field and gets everything ready. So when the emergency responders do roll in, they go right to work, okay? And the bottom line is we're trying to ensure a minimal amount of loss. If you're a businessman here in Boone County, that makes all the difference in the world because the insurance folks have to pay for that. If you've got a plant or a major facility that's put out of commission, you've got a lot of people that don't have jobs through that period of time. Your tax base is hurt. I mean, there's just nothing good that comes out of that. So we protect investments, and it helps us really control the loss in a much more efficient way. If we ever have another large natural disaster here, let's say the New Madrid Fault decides it's going to cut loose, we're going to be light years ahead of where we were back in the Katrina days, where you had 100,000 emergency responders sitting on the perimeter with no real plan as to how to get in there and what to do. Okay? That's our responsibility. That's our responsibility in Boone County, is to make sure that we have these plans in place. It's not the federal government, it's not FEMA, okay? FEMA is not a first responder. We're here, we live here, we need to protect our own first, and that's what this is all about. There's a lot of folks in this last picture here. American Red Cross, Columbia Police, we have the University of Missouri people on board with us, which is very comforting because they have one of the largest research reactors in the world, so making sure that we have that expertise in hand is pretty good. My company, Square D, Kraft Foods, ABC Labs, the city of Centralia is working with us. As a matter of fact, our next seminar is going to be up in Centralia, so we'll have a whole new cast of characters up there to work with. The Highway Patrol, who's now becoming involved. This last exercise that we did, we actually created a scenario where we had to do an evacuation, and so we got into what are the best practices out there and what do we have to do, what kind of problems are we going to run into when we try to evacuate subdivisions and so forth. Because we have the plans in place, but until you actually start working them, you know, you always learn new things. And we had some really excellent revelations out of that. We've got the medical facilities. 3M has been on board with us since the beginning. The Sheriff's Office has been very active. I know when we did the evacuation best practices, Tom Redden, who's the assistant deputy, or up there, the chief deputy, I should say, and I worked together to put that on. It was a very satisfying experience. There are a lot of folks here, and what I would do at this point is I would say that if you're interested in getting more information, I'm going to hang around for a little bit. You can come talk to me. That's my home phone number and that's my cell phone number that's up there on the board. I'll be happy to talk to anybody. If you want to get on our mailing list, I'll send you something so you know when our quarterly meetings are. We have them right over at the commission chambers, okay, in the county building. And they're open to the public. This is your program. The emergency response plan is your plan. It protects you. Okay? These Tier 2 reports, they're yours. This is your information. This is your plan. These emergency responders work for you. You pay the salary. You pay the taxes. And so with any kind of luck, you've got an idea that we're really trying to move this whole thing to the next level so that we can better serve our customers who are the citizens of Boone County. Are there any questions? I'll grab this one first.
What kind of coordination is there between Boone County and adjoining counties? So if we have something drifting in on the wind or coming in through water into our county from outside, that we can coordinate with the surrounding area?
Every county in the state of Missouri has an emergency planning commission who has the same charge that we do. Some of them have better resources than others. Okay, some of them flat just don't have a lot of the people that the other ones do. But everybody's got at least some degree of emergency plan, and in terms of response, there are mutual aid agreements that exist.
Is this part of your table talk?
Yeah, if we think that we need to get mutual aid, right now we're staying within the county, but at some point we'll move out and bring them in. We've had to do that on a lot of smaller cars, on a lot of multi-casualty incidents out on the highway and so forth. But yeah, the agreements are already in place. I'm going to grab this gentleman here and then I'll get back to you. Yes?
Yes, what do you need that you don't have, and if it's a list, what are your priorities?
Actually, right now, what we're working with is we're working with the planning phase of this. We're trying to get the plans in place. We're using what we have right now. We're trying to maximize everything that we have right now. I am sure that each one of these agencies has their own wish list. I know that Boone County does, but I'm not privy. I don't have that information in hand. I know the charge of the LEPC is to basically go out, take the resources that we have right now, and figure out how to most effectively apply them. So I know that's kind of a non-answer to your question. I guess the best answer to your question is I don't know.
Do you have authority issues that the LPC benefit from having resolved?
Actually, the authority issues that are out there, I can tell you as a business representative on this committee, I haven't seen them. I have seen incredibly good coordination between all the agencies and all the commanders that have been there. And I've actually seen this move into the field. I mean, when I'm not doing this kind of thing, I'm responding as a Boone County firefighter. So I ride out there in the big yellow truck when these things go off. And I can tell you that we're extremely comfortable as firefighters with our own officers and with the progress that's being made here, because this whole business of unified command helps us when we go in. It protects us as responders. Yes, sir.
We had the opportunity in one of my classes to have James McNabb come talk to us. And, for those of you who don't know, he's the director of joint communications.
Right.
Whatever, the 911 people. One of the things that my students identified were a number of incidents where there wasn't adequate response from emergency services. One condition, in fact, that I was involved in took almost 15 minutes for first responders to show, and that was a police officer that wasn't called until 5 minutes later. From what Jim told us, there really is no formal 360 evaluation of problems and difficulties unless if something is really pushed. Do you have that sort of review availability to you, and is this part of the process?
I know every time that there's a major event, to my knowledge, okay, there is always some kind of a review. We're going to go back and we're going to take a look at it. What the actual process is, I can't tell you because I haven't been involved in that end of it. That generally happens through the command channels, and I'm not a commander, okay? So, and that gets into agency things. And don't forget, what we do on the LEPC in terms of the planning and everything, that's geared more towards the community response, and we're covered not so much under, say, the fire board or something. We're covered under under a charter from the Emergency Response Commission for the state of Missouri. So I guess the answer to your question is there should be some kind of a review. I know when we do the tabletop exercises, we pick a lot of these things up. We'll bring a lot of these things to the table. Well, do you remember when we made this response? This is what happened and this is why. One of the things that I will tell you is even with all the resources we have, if it all goes off at once, we can have an awful lot of people stretched very, very thinly. I mean, you'll hear every now and then on there that city status is 1 or city status is 0, which means that all the ambulances are out and running. And so if something goes off, there's not another ambulance out there. Okay? And believe me, if we bought 2 more ambulances, at some point we'd have 3 more events. Yes.
This is a very civic-minded community.
Mhm.
I can hypothesize that in any kind of large emergency, you're going to have volunteers streaming in with various levels of expertise in a variety of areas. Has that been factored in? How are you going to handle it? Because people will come out and try to assist. And then we saw some of the mess that made in Katrina. But has
Yeah,
it
there
factored
it.
that in?
There is a program that's out there, and I have actually gone through this program, and I think it's a very good one. And it's called CERT, and it's funded by the federal government, and it's the Community Emergency Response Team. And basically what it's for is private citizens. Not everybody wants to go be a firefighter EMT, okay? Not everybody wants to do vehicle extrication accidents and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they want to be prepared for exactly what you've gotten into, which this is a large event, what do we do? And freelancing is always a problem, okay? And it's one that we do have to control just because we don't want to go in and rescue the rescuers, okay? That becomes a real problem. Though this CERT program that's out there, and Columbia Fire has a chapter. I think Hallsville has a chapter. The JCs in town have a chapter. And Boone County Fire now has a chapter. And folks who are interested in it, we're recruiting them into this because basically when everything goes up at once and the emergency responders are overwhelmed, it's a great resource for us to have because they can come in and they can do some of the jobs, they can do some of the logistical jobs, and they can help us with some of the wide area searches and things like that. And that gives them a structured way to participate.
A follow-up, but do you have a consistent message that media will put out for those people that haven't joined the CERT, people who haven't heard of it, who just have this spontaneous need to go help? Do you have a concerted media response to those people to try to decrease the rescuing of rescuers?
That's always part of the public information picture is to try to get that under control. And of course, one of the things that we have to worry about with emergency responders is how do we control the perimeter of this event, okay? That's one of the reasons that we bring law enforcement in because that is their primary duty. I mean, they're going to work with perimeter control. Of course, if it's criminal activity, they're going to work with that, all right? And they take on a lead role at that point. But actually controlling that perimeter and making sure that that perimeter is secure so that we do not introduce any new life safety issues is something that they're very concerned with, and they work plans on that all the time. And I can tell you as we work through these additional seminars that we have going on, we're going to bring additional things to the table. We're going to start involving the press. We're going to bring other folks in so that we can actually see how some of these things play out in reality. I've got time for, one more question? You've had your hand up for a while, sir.
Say you had a spill right around Parkade and you had all your chiefs together at this round table. Who takes general command of all of that action that's going on? Do you have one person that takes command of all?
You're going to have unified command, but what we have is we have an incident command system, or ICS, and everybody is trained in it down to the I mean, every recruit firefighter in Boone County understands the incident command system, and there is a designated formal process for who's in command and who's going to run at the show in an event. They're not going to sit around and argue about who's going to run it. It's very, very well defined, and that's part of the process that we have that works very well.